Hello and welcome to the new Rainbow Cast podcast series, the new podcast series called the new Rainbow Cast with Autistic Leah, the interview. Just ahead of the releasing episode of the new Rainbow podcasts, Mencap, Kiva Lawrence, Tiffany Nelson, who is a trainee educational psychologist and Let's Talk Disability podcast host, and video broadcaster Athena's, which will be on a podcast feed from September, and I will be an exclusive for the viewers who are watching on Facebook, Watch or YouTube. For those who want to watch the episodes like you may be doing right now with this podcast, as I'm working through in the back catalogue of all the past episodes from the podcast's return in October 2022. The first episode of the newer releases of the best of the Neurocast interviews is up for you now to watch on Facebook Watch and YouTube with Jessica Espin. The next will be with Sarah Rose Gibbs, but I'll say this is the Harriet Kemsley as recorded earlier this year in January. As most of the bookings of the podcast are from people who I've engaged with across social media, whether it was before with Twitter and continually through Facebook, Instagram and TikTok, and seen across social media. If you got any recommendations for who you like to see, or if you want to feature on a podcast, please email neurorainbow@neurorainbowcast. The interview, however, was one of the first guests on my list who I've managed to book, who's been on telly and who's quite regular on television in the United Kingdom, whether that's on 8 out of 10 Cats and its spin-off series Cats Does Countdown on Channel 4 and E4, and whether that's also Roast Battle, Gospel and her semi-reality sitcom series Bobby and Harriet Gets Married, which follows the wedding with comedian Bobby Mair, and she's also featured on the stand-up sketch show on ITV2 Hypothetical Question Team on Dave, and Richard Osman's House Games, which is featured on BBC Two and repeated on Dave, as well as you make review on BBC Sounds and Radio 4 Extra with the Comedy Club interview series, where she's chatted to other comedians and interviewed them about their career in comedy. And she's also featured on the podcast Trusty Hobbs and the Cuddle Club. You'll be able to find a lot more about her by visiting www.neurorainbowproject.com. And that's if you want to find more about the podcast alumni. And they said, like for all future episodes and this one, we can choose either to watch on Facebook or YouTube and via the New Rainbow Cast player, and finding the New Rainbow Cast interviews a playlist, which for if you're watching on Facebook, you may want to search for the New Rainbow Project and to like that page for more. To listen to this has been released simultaneously as one of the revisited episodes. You'll be able to find it on all the cast supported platforms by searching New Rainbow Cast with Autistic Leah. So listening, hope you enjoy this re-release of the Harriet Kemsley interview if you haven't already watched this before.
Yeah. Okay, now that we press record, I'll introduce myself. I'm Harriet Kemsley. Hello.
Yeah, so in this interview, we'll be talking to you about your dyspraxia, as well as your Korean comedy and what type of comedy you're doing. And start by you explain about your dyspraxia and how you got your diagnosis.
So since I was my mum said that when I was younger, people had said that I might have dyspraxia, but she never told me. And then when I was like in my mid-20s, everything was just chaos. And my sister was watching Embarrassing Bodies. And then she said, Harriet, I was watching Embarrassing Bodies last night, and I think you might have the thing that the woman had on it. And I was like, this sounds very concerning and also insulting. She was like, it's this thing called dyspraxia. They did this test, like this clap test. She taught me the test, and so I had to do it. We were having lunch, and I did it at the table, and it went so badly that I knocked over a glass. She was like, I think you got dyspraxia. Then my husband bought me a book about it, and I was reading it, and I just burst into tears, and I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. This feels like how I've lived for so long. I ended up getting a private diagnosis, which is quite expensive. I think now it's like 3 times as much. Like, it's crazy. I feel lucky that I did that. But what I say to people that can't afford that is that basically, if you think you have it, you have it. Having the diagnosis is a nice reassurance from somebody else, but you know yourself. And if you have those symptoms, other people don't, and they're just living their lives, and they'd read something like listing the symptoms and they'd think, this is not me.
If you find out later in life, then as you say, you can work out for yourself, and then you know what you have it before thinking of getting diagnosed or self-diagnosing yourself. You probably worked out some ways of working, like what's best for you and how to like support yourself. By that age, you worked out different ways of supporting yourself and ways of coping with having dyspraxia.
I would say though that I hadn't at that point. Learning about it and finding out about it, that was the point when my life changed massively, because I really started to put things in place that really helped me. These like little tiny tools that mean that I just don't live in as much chaos as I used to. So I think there are so many good books about it, and like even the internet like has so many things that just, if you just try and follow these things, it can really make a difference.
So what was the tools and the books that when you found out you were dyspraxic and got told, as you said, by your sister that you probably dyspraxic from her watching Embarrassing Bodies, and then Bobby buying you the book. So what was the things that you started to think that I could put into like my daily life to make those things easier for yourself?
I think having a routine is really helpful, because if I don't, then I can just like procrastinate and just end up doing like, and also having a place for everything. It sounds so obvious, but that is not how I lived. I would just spend so long finding things and doing things, and now like I've got into like a habit where I just have to put everything has a place, and then I save, I mean, literally an hour a day in not trying to find things. Just like all these things that just, all these like things that would just come as second nature, I think, to other people have just had, like, I have a bowl by the door where I put my keys. So when I walk in, I put my keys down. And it's like I've had to really teach myself and force myself to do it. But it means I don't spend 20 minutes looking for keys, and then you're running late, and then you get flustered, and then everything gets harder.
Yeah, I understand the thing about being flustered, because I think when challenge I always find with being dyspraxic myself, it's the remembering things, remember how you put things. For myself, I relate to being able to like be so forgetful. After like say you've taken my tablet, a few more seconds later my memory's that bad that I forget very like that I taken my tablet just then.
Yeah.
I always like trying to find my remote on my phone, and then even if I just put it down in front of me, or like even if it's visibly there. I was diagnosed when I was like about 6 or 7, and even at getting diagnosed that young, I'm still working out ways of coping with it and finding things, because I'm still very like living in a bit of a mess of trying to remember how I put things.
Yeah, I find one thing that's really helped is I write literally every single thing in my phone calendar. So I know exactly what I'm doing. I put the time in, I put what I'm doing. Sometimes I even put like the time that I need to leave in order to get there, because sometimes that can be a whole thing where you can't quite understand the concept of adding that in. I think it's so hard. When I was younger, I got banned from homework, which I thought was a really good thing at the time, but it was because I just kept losing all the sheets. And my teacher got so cross, and she was like, Harriet, every week I print off these sheets and I give it to you. And you come in the next week and you say, I don't know what happened to it. I've lost it. And so then it affects kind of your ability to work and to study and to learn, and it
Yeah.
affects your self-esteem as well, because you think, why can't I look after a sheet? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I'd say it does affect your confidence, because then, like, if you're not remembering to do so many different things, and I'd say that even if you got told you don't have to do homework because you keep on forgetting the sheets and remembering to hand the work, then the confidence and being able to trust it to bring the sheets and bring things in on time and do all that stuff. Like, probably easier not to to think about doing homework then, as saying it then does become a bit challenging of you are that different to everyone else in the class. I guess when you to know you're a dyspraxic then, and getting told that you didn't have to bring in homework, then you found that you felt like there was something different then from when you was a school age.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that it's just really, it's just hard, like, just feeling like, I think this phrase comes up a lot with dyspraxia, but like you're living in chaos, and
Yeah,
everyone else just seems to be able to function in a normal way. You just arrive somewhere and you're just like, you're all over the place. And then I think the problem is, this is why I try and live like so like carefully, because once I get flustered, it's like it's this knock-on effect where the whole day, Bob, my husband, calls them my dyspraxic days, where just the whole thing can just go
yeah.
wrong, because everything gets off and then you're on another planet.
Yeah, because as you say that, when you like, as you say, flustered and get a bit overwhelmed, then I guess you could get over stressed out about those kind of things that accumulate, and then it can have a ladder on effect of things throughout the day, and I guess then you tend to be more stressed or anxious, or
Yeah,
then like your mood kind of dips on those days, and I guess then before the time you were diagnosed and that you were dyspraxic, I guess that then you had quite a lot of days like that, and then a lot of days when you kind of felt if there's something on, you wish you kind of knew something about it, is it? Yeah, I was saying that, because you was flustered then, when you was younger, those dyspraxic days of when you was like struggling with certain things, then it was just trying to say that, I guess then you went on certain days, you wish that you knew that you were dyspraxic, just so you
yes.
could make those things easier.
And that's what's made it so much better, knowing, I don't know how long it's been since I got diagnosed, like maybe like 6 or 7 years, maybe. It's like it's just made me like have, like, I think so often when you make mistakes, your voice in your head can be so mean, and it just makes you go, you're so stupid, like, why can't you do this
Yeah,
like simple thing that everyone else is managing? And then you'll get flustered, and then you'll spill something else, and then you'll do this other thing, and then it's just like you just feel so embarrassed in your own skin. I think knowing it, reading about it, it has allowed me to have some compassion, also like lean into it and be like, there are really brilliant things that come with having it, and things like dyspraxics are so funny and like
yeah,
fun to be with, and they don't take things, in general, they don't take things very seriously, and I think one of the things we're so good at is just making mistakes over and over and over again and just keeping on going. I think that's like really helped me in so many ways in my life. Like doing stand up, you fail so often, and you have, it's like, can be humiliating when you say something you think is funny and people don't laugh, but because we're so used to embarrassment, it doesn't phase us, so we can do
yeah.
things that other people find much harder.
Yeah, I see. It's the ability to be able to keep on trying then. Going back on, as you said, about when you were diagnosed. So what was like then when you're like told to like your mother and your parents that you're dyspraxic and your right family, as you said that you hinted earlier on in the podcast interview that she was told before by people who knew her that you probably were dyspraxic then. So what were your family's knowledge of dyspraxia, and what do you find were the things that you found out from telling your family and looking back at your childhood?
I will say nobody that was close to me was surprised. I was lucky, everyone was very like sweet about it, and I think I have always been good at laughing at it, which I think a lot of dyspraxics are. I mean, sometimes it can feel bad, but I think they all kind of shared their like stories of me like doing something. Like there was this time apparently when I was sat in the back of the car and I had an ice cream, I went to lift up one hand but then got confused between my hands and lifted up my hand with the ice cream, and then they said there's a stain on the ceiling of the car, like just because I got my hands confused, and it got ice cream everywhere. And every meal my mum was like, you would spill something. She was like, it was so frustrating because I would get you all sat down and then you would spill a drink. When I was younger, she like banned me from sitting on the sofa. I wasn't allowed in the living room if I was having a drink because I'd just spill it. I think it helped in a way for everyone to have a bit of compassion and think this isn't something I'm doing on purpose, or I'm not being like lazy or careless. This is just me, I guess.
Yeah, as you say that, it's like with like drinks. I'm glad I never had carpet in the house. It does happen too often, as you were saying, with your parents. Before you even diagnosed, they already notice things that without knowing you just they must notice things. It was like part of who you are that you was a bit more clumsy and made more mistakes practically. Already having like an understanding and empathy, at least that made things easier for you when you were younger. That probably made you a bit more comfortable and seeing a funny side in things.
Yeah, definitely. I think people can be quite mean sometimes and lack a kind of understanding and get frustrated with people with dyspraxia. And I think you need to try and move away from those people. That was one good thing my husband was really good at. Like he was good at being compassionate about it. He made like a dyspraxia fund. And so every time I broke something and I just like felt like so stupid, he'd be like, it's fine. It comes out of the dyspraxia fund, like that. And I think things like that, just having kindness, other people having kindness makes it so much easier. And I think if people aren't being very nice or very understanding, then definitely move away from those people and spend less time with those people. Difficult if it's family.
I suppose if you got people who are like a bit more kind and compassionate and supportive, then that's helpful to see the more fun laughings off her then.
And you get less panicked, and so you make less mistakes. It's a weird circle.
If you're more anxious or nervous, then of course things would have been you'd be able to meet more errors. If you've been more comfortable within yourself, like I am, then it'll, like if you made some sort of error, you'll start to have a laugh with it. So would you think like being able to like fine tune it, would you see that's part of being to getting into comedy?
Yeah, I think it's been a really helpful thing with comedy in that you're so used to laughing at yourself from a young age. I think there's quite a few dyspraxics that do comedy, and I really recommend Bizwas. Yeah, he's very funny. I think we're just good at seeing the funny side of things, and we also have a really tough skin, which is what you need for things like that. In order to kind of put yourself out there, you need to be able to laugh at yourself and fail.
I've seen a lot. I noticed there's quite a few neurodivergent people in comedy. I'd say in comedy, it does take a fix, like something to be able to come like off like certain like gigs, like when that didn't go that great. It takes a lot to come back from that and to be able to try it again and learn from our mistakes. I'd say that it does take something from in yourself. And as I like think that it must take something to like put together so like found out that you can be quite funny, and then I see it's quite a big thing to translate being funny into a whole comedy act and being a comedian.
I think the key that I found is just doing it over and over and over again. I used to be like very shy when I was younger, and it's definitely helped with that. But it is one of those things, I think, where just the more you do it, the easier it is, and the more you become yourself on stage. I think that was the things I found harder. Like now when gigs go well, like I feel like my best self, and often like I'll knock something over, or I'll like, but it's like it's slightly chaotic. Like I get reviews and things saying that it is like kind of chaotic fun. I think lean into the things that make you you, and try to keep just getting on stage until you feel like you're kind of the most you.
I could see like that you lent into like different aspects of yourself, like many comedians do different parts of your identity and parts of who you are. And that's from what I've seen often watching you on the television on like 8 out of 10 Cats Countdown to Live at Palo stand-up sketch show, and recently saw you live in Cardiff and down the Cardiff Bay when you were doing your latest stand-up sketch show.
Is it that you went to the wrong venue? Did you go to the wrong?
Yeah. Oh no, I went to the right one, but they booked for the wrong venue on the wrong date.
Oh
like,
no!
Yeah, it was really on that night. And look, I was there, and I was thinking, oh, I was, I was thinking that, oh, I booked for the, your act, your show. And then the lady was like, oh, hold on, you kind of booked for Birmingham on like 7th of November. And I was just glad that I was like, I wouldn't have to do that. But laughing at myself and like shocked. But Lucy was like very great, like, oh, there's like space for like a table, and guys sit down. And Lisa was quite good seats. I could, see.
And she let you just come in. You didn't have to buy another ticket. Okay, great.
Yeah, great stuff at the club. Yeah,
they're lovely there. They're so nice. Oh God, yeah, it's just things like that. I think when you can have fun of it, I think the times I found it hardest is when I have to like pretend that when I was younger, I definitely felt like I had to pretend to be really together. And then it would like all come like tumbling out in like the worst ways, just trying to be like, oh, well, this is going to happen, now and again.
Like it comes tumbling out when you're trying to, like bring yourself, like feel like you got yourself together. I guess that's what, like probably when you did job interviews, did a standard like 9 to 5 job, and like
it's so hard,
like studying in university, stuff like that.
I
guess then was real challenge when you're adulting, and then I guess when you like started doing something like comedy and something creative like that, then you started being able like and be natural self. Then as you're saying, it's not like you're doing job interviews or like doing certain tasks where you're like, booking in people with appointments or like doing any second office work. Then I found a space where you can start to be yourself.
Yeah, I think definitely. I feel very lucky in that. I think it's so hard because I struggled to get jobs, and then I'd get a job and I would just never do very well at it. I worked in a bar and I flooded the basement once because I would break so many glasses, and then I worked booking hospital appointments, and I wouldn't know how to use a fax machine, and it just feels like so much pressure, like having to do like regular tasks. So I do feel very lucky to have found a job where I can be myself. I think in a lot of jobs, people in like 50-50, I think some people would just be kind and like see it, like have a sense of humor and be nice about it. But I think it's very hard if you're in an environment where people get cross, or like you have to pretend, and then you're just like, oh God, this is so hard to function with.
I was like doing like something like bar work or waitressing. I was just saying with like for those simple tasks, when you're like struggling on a day-to-day basis, I was just saying, even though like some people can be quite kind and understand, and then it's that struggle with it being day-to-day, and like certain issues like that, then can, as I said earlier, that certain struggles can then knock on your confidence.
Yeah, definitely. I was a waitress and that was a disaster. I once spilt soup all over this woman's head, like a whole bowl of soup. And it was like in the middle of the day, and she was wearing this like light colored suit, and she was so covered in like green soup. I can't even describe to you, like through her hair. She like yelled at me, which is fair enough. She was just minding her own business and she was covered. It might have been hot. And then I burst into tears and I ran into the kitchen, and I just like I felt so bad, but also like when people get cross, it just makes it so, like you just feel so like stupid. And
Yeah.
then she ended up coming and having to apologize to me because she made me cry, and I was like, I think this is the wrong way around. But my boss then, he just didn't really get it, but it's fair enough. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
being a waitress, you don't
Yeah.
you need to be quite together.
Yeah. I know, I mean, yeah, because it would be wrestling like this. Hopefully it's just fat and not any hot soup then.
Yeah, you
because
shouldn't be around hot soup with
Yeah.
dyspraxia, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, because like always when you're in restaurants, I wouldn't know how to when you see the people with the plate stacked up on like
Yes.
that stuff I find like, you know, if how you would know how to carry all that on your arms like that. So with comedy then I guess you found you like ways of that you can do things in a way you want not having to do tasks that you struggle and can find a way you're thriving.
Yeah, it's really nice. And especially when as I was really shy when I was younger, it's really nice to feel like you can be yourself and be liked for that. That feels really nice because it's not always been easy to feel like I can be myself or say what I think. And comedy is all about saying what you think in the moment and being like honest. I think that's where some of the best comedy comes from. And that's not always come naturally. It's really helped me be myself, I think.
Yeah, I'd say there's very few comedians who are neurodivergent and people in the arts, and I think it's a space in an area that works best for neurodivergent people, as I like you would know there's a lot of people in comedy who have ADHD.
Yeah, well, I think
And
that's why neurodivergent people are so good because they think differently to other
yeah,
people, and we often have perspectives that other people are like have. It's not the normal thought. We think of things oddly. That's where comedy can come from.
yeah, like whether you can probably like feel a bit more control and have a bit more agency in a space, and like you know, you can be able to write stuff. And I think writing comedy art is quite important for the neurodivergent people, like as I found with you know yourself as that when I saw you on TV doing like 8 out of 10 cats this countdown. That was like one of the first times I seen like dyspraxia mentioned on TV. I think as a person who's dyspraxic or like a neurodivergent, it's quite important to see like another neurodivergent
Yeah.
person talk about on TV.
Yeah, I think it's good. And I think if you can see someone, I don't know, it's like it's the same thing as like being like a woman in stand-up, like seeing other women do it makes you think you can do it and makes you feel like things are possible, I think. And so I don't know, I think I like talking about it because I think if I had known, or people that might know that they're dyspraxic and they watch it, they think, oh, I could do that, that's probably a thing that would suit me doing comedy. So I think it's helpful.
I was just saying about like women when you like started in comedy or before that. What more you like seen in comedy and like your favorite comedians or comedy shows would have been women that you may have related to or like found quite relatable. And I think that's a very important thing in comedy that I think you more feel naturally to laugh and enjoy somebody you find who you can relate to in the comedy that you're speaking about as. I think with comedy, it's a good space of finding somebody to relate to and feel less alone or a bit like
Yeah.
a bit more happy and positive in yourself. As you say, with like dyspraxia, sometimes you can find ways of finding humor in that. But if you see another dyspraxic person on TV talking about it, having a bit of a laugh with it, you can feel a bit more confident and less alone in yourself if you've got lacking that personal confidence. So
Yeah, I think definitely. I think
yeah,
it can feel quite lonely. I think when you are someone that like makes mistakes a lot, you can be quite hard on yourself. And so I think seeing people speak about it, I think seeing anybody speak about it is a helpful thing because you think, oh, they can do that, I can do that, or just be like, I'm not so weird after all.
yeah. As I
I mean,
said,
people
yeah,
might see me and be like, I don't want to be like her. This is terrible. I'm just like her. This is awful. Yeah,
yeah,
I think it's helpful.
yeah. It's definitely helpful. It's just one way of like, as I say, you bring a bit of laughter and joy in the day, and that's purpose comedy. So when you're starting in comedy, would you find the people that influenced you and influenced your comedy?
So one of my biggest inspirations was Catherine Ryan. I opened for her on tour like quite early on in my career. I mean, she is a very together, like almost kind of like a perfect person, I think. So she's quite different to me in that she is like very together, and she kind of always like knows her own mind, and she's so brilliant. But she was so like generous and kind, and I learned so much from watching her because she'd be so funny. Also, she was so thoughtful and generous to everybody around her. Yeah, she was just like constantly so funny. And then other comics I love, Maria Bamford. I think that she is somebody that is so honest about all her difficulties, and she is so unique and so herself on stage. She speaks about things that I love watching comics that talk about things that are very truthful and maybe quite things that are not often spoken about, and making it funny, and then therefore making people feel less alone. And she is so brilliant at being so unique and making kind of the hardest subject matters so funny.
What type of themes does she touch on in her comedy then?
So she talks about mental illness quite a lot, and she's had quite a few struggles. She talks about that a lot. She's also recently started talking about her mum's death. It's so sad, like her mum was like included in a lot of her comedy, so I think the audience kind of feels like they know her a bit, but she's talking about something that's so hard to speak about, but also being so funny at the same time.
It kind of takes quite skill and talent to find a way of telling that in humorous vein and getting the tone right. It's important to address these themes and talk about things that can be quite difficult to talk about when there's space of comedy. But sometimes it's a more easier space in a way to talk about it and, you know, kind of feel comforted from that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. As I say, can speak honestly about themselves and being quite authentic on their own life experience has influenced some of the themes and stuff you talked about in your own comedy.
Yeah, definitely. I think when I started, I was quite dark in my comedy, but that felt very normal, I think, because those were the thoughts I was having. Also, I was working in this job where I had to type up the news, and I was just listening to the news all through the day. And so it felt normal to talk about those kind of things. You always want to try and be interesting and say things that people haven't said before. But I think the most important thing is just to say things that you think of. If you can make yourself laugh, then that's the key.
From that, of trying again, that you find ways of like making it work time and time again. When you started out, that was like, I think over 10 years ago then. I think something would be, when do you kind of start out in comedy?
Yeah, so I started like over 10 years ago. And I think one of the things, especially doing my tour show, I have so much fun. It makes me feel really nice when people laugh and they connect to what you're saying, and I can be silly and I think say what I think, and I really feel like myself. I think I used to find it very difficult to talk to people and connect. So when people are laughing at things that I say, it feels really good. So I think that's why it's so nice to keep doing it.
Like, even if you have started off by not having the best of yourself, then when you get out on stage, start doing your comedy, then like making people laughing, then I guess that helps your mood and you boost your own confidence then.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, at least since then, when you started your career, you've done different stuff, whether be on radio, and then you, like, as I said, you've done stuff like 8 out of 10 Captures Countdown, and managed to touch on different themes in comedy. As I say, recently you talked about being a mother, references to your childhood, and to like press and like body image of women in society. As I said earlier on, you touched about dyspraxia as well in your comedy. Seen that before in sketches. When I saw you on the stand-up sketch, so and you acted out a segment from your diagnosis. You remember what's that? And like saying that when you were getting diagnosed, you tripped over a bowl.
Yeah. So in the joke, I say that the professor walked in and I had my foot stuck in a bowl, but it actually happened when I was on the phone doing an over the phone diagnosis. I got so panicked and I was just walking, I was like pacing in the living room, and then I got my foot in this bowl that was on the ground and it got stuck on my foot. And then I was saying, sorry, just give me one moment while I just get this bowl off of my foot. And then he was I think you have dyspraxia. I think you don't need to do this test, because somehow I'd got my foot stuck in a bowl while just talking to the guy. And yeah, so yeah, that was a bit of my stand up for a while.
Yeah, I could see that and stand up from that. I could tell that one of the key things you were that including your stand up, and as I said, you've been on 8 out of 10 cats, and that was the first place I saw you. You did stuff out like Alan Carr. And so, what was your experience of working on with comedians on shows like that?
It's really nice. I think that it's like really intimidating because these are like the best people in the world at comedy, like Sean Locke and Alan Carr. I mean, they're just the best. And so you're sitting there and you're thinking, nobody wants to hear from me. Like, these are the best people in the world. So it's hard to kind of keep talking and being involved, but I think the more you do, the more fun you have, and the more you get involved, the more you enjoy it. But sometimes you just sit back and you're like, this is so funny, this is so brilliant, and then you're like, wait, I'm here too. It's very fun.
I can imagine it must be quite different going from like as you like performing on stage, like doing stand-up shows, then being like in the TV studio with, as you say, you have like comedians that you watched before on TV, like Live in Apollo, and then being in the same space, bouncing off jokes from each other.
Yeah, it's really nice. I think stand-up, like generally with gigs, like there's a real camaraderie, like you go through something together with the other comics, but a lot of the time it is a very kind of individual thing, like you're working on your act alone, like it's just you on stage at the time. And so it is really nice to do things with other people and kind of bounce off other people that have similar brains to you. It's very fun.
Yeah, I could tell like the fun enjoyment from, as I said, watching stuff like 8 out of 10 cats, able to see comedians like Sean Locke, who I really enjoyed on the show, doing like when you had different items, bringing them on. As you're saying that, like about the natural sense of humor, dyspraxia, I could see that on the show, kind of naturally sense of humor that you bounce off the different people on the show, and probably like must have been like helpful in your career being able to work with like a record long established to get that confidence or get a bit of advice or like chat to them about their career or like about their comedy as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that when someone like Sean Locke laughs, that's the best feeling in the whole world.
Yeah.
So that definitely makes you feel good.
You've been at it for many years doing the stand and towards several shows and going to like the Edinburgh Fringe and like done stuff like TV shows when you yourself and your husband on getting married and different stuff like that.
Yeah, it's been really fun doing lots of different things. I think that's the amazing thing with doing comedy. All these random things come off it. I always try and think like the stand-up is like the day job, like you go back to that, but there's all these fun things that can come off it.
At one point you did end up doing a podcast. You yourself listened to that one before, and like you did called Where's Harriet Crying? So like tell a bit about the podcast you used to do. Like I burn puffy and with like anxiety and that can be related to dyspraxia and like a recurring thing. So what do you think was the origin of starting the podcast with that title?
Yeah, so I did it with one of my favourite people, Sunil Patel, who's a very funny comedian. I recommend checking him out. He is very together, quite serious. He hasn't cried since he was 7 and tripped over a dog, whereas I live in chaos, especially at the time. I think like when we started it, like I think I might have just got my diagnosis. I was just get overwhelmed and flustered and just cry very often. And so each week there was the idea that we'd talk about a time that I cried, and I would try and make Sunil feel something, and it would never happen. It was kind of like a mental health podcast, like in a way, but it was very silly and very light. And we'd get people on and talk about times that they also had cried about something stupid. Like I just kind of wanted to make fun of it, because I think if you can laugh at these moments, then it makes it so much easier not to take things too seriously.
I felt it was more like a comedy podcast than mental health. As you say, like
Yeah.
it, you know, like touch on moments of like, I'd say getting pretty overwhelmed or over emotional, but I say like it was very much for the comedy factor, as like there would be like the point in each episode where you would find like a random news story or like random video where you would read off to someone about like certain thing that you thought was a sad story and try to make him like play on, you know, on the
And he'd just
podcast.
get angry.
Listen to her, I thought, say something that you probably, when you read up about dyspraxia, you see the link with hyper and getting very emotional. Do you feel that some of that does relate to being dyspraxic?
Yeah, I think so. I would just get very overwhelmed and very anxious, because I would be so worried about making a mistake or doing the wrong thing. I think you can get all these things in your head. I think because as well, like I'd sometimes say the wrong thing or misunderstand something and respond wrong, then I worry that I'd upset people. And so I'd have to go through everything in my head before I said it out loud, or I'd have to think everything through like so much in ahead of time so that I wouldn't make a mistake. And then when you do make a mistake, it's just exhausting. I think definitely talking about it and laughing at it helps.
Yeah, I suppose highlighted on something like that. One thing that's when people hear about dyspraxia and like the general definition of it, normally like people think of the practical clumsiness, like messy with things in order. Then, as you've seen that, you have to think about like certain things. Just when it was like traits that maybe some people wouldn't know or understand and think of being dyspraxic, and like, something that can overlink and the umbrellas of other neurodivergent conditions and being autistic. Some of that can relate, and there's some things that you look on other neurodivergent conditions, and you do see similarities there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's definitely a spectrum, and I definitely have
Yeah,
things like I don't like change very much. Sometimes I can find that very overwhelming, and I don't always know the right thing to do. That can feel bad. I think it's all quite related, I
yeah.
think.
As you were saying, like with change not knowing the right thing to, then it's like
That was a dyspraxic moment. Aaron just
yeah.
threw his pen over his shoulder.
Yeah, if you already planned things ahead in your brain, and then you said you're going to go be working with your own internal way of planning things, and they can work around that. So it makes it like coping mechanisms. Then that can be like struggling with the dyspraxia.
Yeah, definitely. I think that everything can add up. Like it sounds like silly things to people. You're like, I spilt something down my top. But then if you're going somewhere like important and you have to look together, and then you're very scruffy, you can't find something, you leave late, go the wrong way, fall in a puddle. Like it's just all these
Yeah,
things add up. And then you just think, why am I not like a together person? And you turn up and you've forgotten something, or you say the wrong thing, and it can affect your self-esteem, I think, and that
yeah,
affects your like anxiety. And
yeah. As I said, it can affect your self-esteem, and it can affect like how you feel it, like independence, and you're like, as you say, like struggling to know like sense directions and remembering certain things. It's then mixed out to try new things and go new places. That's important of over time learning coping mechanisms and having
yeah,
plans in places. Assume that if you were to go to a new place, then you would look it up on Google Maps.
it can just make your day sometimes like 15% better, and it can stop that turn in your day when just everything goes
Yeah.
to shit and it's just madness.
Yeah, then even though like if you've been that way before to that place, then it's like sometimes with the dyspraxia, then you can remember things once, but then on one day you forget certain things. So, like as I was saying, I'm talking about self-esteem and the confidence with dyspraxia, and as I said, the anxiety. So, what has been your experience with mental health and of certain struggles undiagnosed later on life that you found that you had to like try like therapy and like certain therapies to help you?
Yeah, I thought when I found out I'd be like so happy. When I first read about it, I started crying and I was like, oh my God, this is so much like me. I thought If I get diagnosed with this, I'll feel so happy because I'll feel so pleased to understand myself. Actually, I felt when I did get diagnosed, I felt really sad and a bit like wistful for the time that I hadn't known, and that I just had been so hard on myself, and I just felt like I'd like made so many mistakes and just no one had known why, and I just had looked like such an idiot. Like I just was hard on myself. I've done a lot of therapy, but I think the thing that helped me the most was this therapy called DBT, and it's not necessarily for dyspraxics, but I think one of the things that's good about it is that it's not just going through all your thinking and the things that have happened and like your life, it's giving you like tools, which I think are some of the most helpful things for dyspraxia, like of in this moment, if you do this thing, I had PTSD before and it really helped with that as well. Also just times when I would get a bit panicky of just things to do in that moment, that rather than lean into it and you become more panicked and you go down a spiral, you do actions like put cold water on your wrist and take a series of breaths, and you have a sweet that you like and you go for a walk, or like little things like that that just help you have tools to help yourself rather than just not knowing what to do when you start to panic. It's actually dialectical by behavioral therapy. It's called DBT. I really recommend it to everybody.
Yeah, that sounds really helpful, and something that would be really helpful for somebody like myself, or like any other dyspraxics or people who struggle with anxiety, seem to have panic attacks on self-esteem and confidence. And as you're saying that, like probably when you got diagnosed, then it's like to say that you found like really stuff like finding like laughed over the years, and you know, like parents like understanding, and as you said, your teachers went to like shouty at you or angry with you, but like said you could skip doing homework, but like some things, as you said, you affects your confidence. And I guess you had that moment of mixed emotions because you've had a big grief not having that diagnosis before in time. And I can understand how not having a diagnosis of a neurodivergent condition, and is it that yourself you're having panic attacks and could help yourself with that?
Exactly, that's it. It's just learning how to help yourself, and then learning how to not get in that place in the first place, where you can look at your thoughts and be more practical. So I really recommend it.
And I guess you found your mental health improved a lot then from that.
Yeah, definitely.
Anything else you wish to say that you haven't said already on a podcast?
I think dyspraxics we're a bit different, but I think lean into that and try and embrace it, try and have fun with it. I know it can be really hard, but actually if it's a really cool thing that can mean that you have a lot of like really good things that other people don't have. And I think reading about it and understanding it really helps, and trying to put in routines, because I think the more routine that you have, the easier it is to automatically do things rather than automatically do the worst thing. Everything will take you longer, and just try and be kind to yourself. It's hard enough, you know.
Do you remember the titles of the books that you were reading?
I met one of the authors actually. I did the dyspraxia conference thing, and I met Janet Taylor, written about it quite a lot. So dyspraxic adults surviving in a non-dyspraxic world, living with dyspraxia, Caged in Chaos by Victoria Biggs. Another book I found quite helpful. I haven't finished it. I've only read a chapter, but and I'm starting to read it. But Atomic Habits, I think that might be quite a good book for learning how to kind of get into.
Wrapping up with the podcast. So is there anything you want to plug and promote at the end?
Well, I'm going to be filming my stand-up show. It's kind of an amalgamation of my last show, Slutty Joan, and my new show, Honeysuckle Island. My Instagram's at Harriet Kemsley. The same on Twitter. It will be available online.
Excellent, fantastic. And I guess like one thing would make the world better for a neurodivergent person. Any thoughts on that? Like anything better
to make things better? I think teleporting. I think that would be a really helpful thing. Then we don't have to get on a bus or have to work out where we're going. I think if we could just teleport, that would really make life much easier.
Okay, teleportation, that's the thing.
If someone can invent that, please, that would really help.
Yeah, it would be quite handy and convenient. You know, easier than taking a bus. Yeah, thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks
Harriet.
so much, Aaron.
Yeah.
Nice to chat to
Yeah,
you.
thank you very much.